All right, welcome back to another episode of Just Buy Less Coffee, answering the deeper questions of American politics. My name is Troy, aka Keep Troy Blue. With me, as always, is Cathy CBD Cannon, aka Cannon's Fodder. We are discussing. We have a really cool deep dive later on. By the way, we're going to get back into some European politics because that just seems to be where Cathy and I's head is at these days. Maybe trying to mentally extricate ourselves from the United States elections a little bit by looking at what's going on in Europe. But two crucial bellwether elections in the UK and France last week. So we want to talk about those a little bit. We're going to get into a deep dive on how elections work in Europe. Cathy's going to lead it. So that it's going to be good. Probably have some of it bleed over into Patreon. So when we get to the end of the show, we'll probably keep going, but only if you're on Patreon. So head on over to patreon.com/justbuylesscoffee. Subscribe $5 a month, and you can get access to the exclusive deep dive content where Cathy gets all exclusive. And for the regular listeners, we will have a significant chunk of it too. But anyway, how you doing, Cathy? More calls for Biden to drop out of the race after the disastrous debate a couple weeks ago. Last time we came out pretty heavily in the Biden dropout column, swap in Kamala Harris. Since then, Biden has really hardcore announced that he's staying in, calling everyone who wants him to drop out and one of the elite. So it looks like for the time being, it looks like he's pretty into staying in. Still not doing much, though, to calm nerves. Still not going out and having mini campaign events. He's got a very sort of relaxed schedule for someone who's running for president. So where are you at on your mindset here? Have you what are your thoughts on how Biden's sort of showing out here for someone who wants to stay in the race?
Well, publicly, he has to be 100% in it until he's not. That's just the reality of it. He can't publicly be running for president right now, all wishy-washy, we'll see how I feel next week. He can't be doing that. So he has to show of strength, right? That doesn't surprise me. I think a little bit of the energy behind his I'm staying in it is personal. And I hate to say this because I want to be very clear, is that I think Joe Biden has done a very good job as president of the United States, right? But it's I made the point, I don't know if it was 1 or 2 episodes ago, right? What he's been able to do and what he's capable of still doing isn't the same as what he will be capable of doing, right? I fully trust him to finish his term. I fully trust him to handle what's going on now. I have no doubt that he is on a day-to-day basis fine. I do have a doubt that will remain true if he's running himself as ragged as both the job of the presidency and the job of running for president will be. Undoubtedly, it's arduous. It's hard on everybody, especially an 81-year-old who's already starting to show signs of his aging, right? And a lot of the interviews I've been seeing have been people saying that this started happening within the last few months, that he'd been fine, but it's been within
he doesn't look as good as he did even a few months ago. I am actually firmly in belief that that's accurate, that he's actually kind of hit a wall physically and he's just slowing down.
Well, yeah, and that's just a natural part of aging. Now, that doesn't mean he has Parkinson's disease. It doesn't mean that he has some mental deficiency and he's not capable of doing things. It means that he's getting too old for what he needs to do. And truthfully, if we frame it as thank you, Joe, right? We've got it from here, right? Because that's really what it is. It's not, and I think it feels to him like it is a call for you haven't done a good enough job. We need somebody better. It's you've done a great job. Let us finish it for you. And I think if they start framing it more as we need to finish this for Joe Biden, right? We need to take his torch and run with it. We need to do what he showed us to do with the future of the party instead of he's too old, he needs to go, right? It's about framing. It's what Democrats are always bad at, is framing something in a positive way. I know. Why don't they just fucking hire me? That's what it is. Thank you, Joe. You've done great. Then the whole convention can be about the old generation and the new generation. Then everything that people say about the Democrats back in the whatever were the slavery party, embrace all of it. This is who the part, show the evolution of the party and Joe Biden being there for all of it because he's a million. And then literally make it Olympic torch style, handing the torch to the future of the party as somebody represented by who we have called the backbone of the party. Look, I'm so good at this.
It's sort of like it's sort of like how Nancy Pelosi stepped out from being speaker and now she's speaker emerita. And she's technically kind of just become a backbencher, but she's actually, you know, she has like a place of honor within the party, and like she's sort of a sage. She's passed the torch off to a younger generation, but she's still there, and she's sort of a sage, you know, place of wisdom.
Yeah,
we've never really experienced this, at least in the modern era, to have a president step down for age. But he could still be around. He could still be a top advisor. He could still have a place of honor, especially in the Democratic Party. If he did something like this. Some developments. Hollywood has kind of turned on Biden, and I say turned on him. I just mean they're the big Hollywood bigwigs are sort of in the swap out mindset right now. And George Clooney was the big one, coming out with an op-ed today, basically saying what you just said, like, Joe, we love you, but it's time for someone new. George Clooney is probably the most powerful person in Hollywood, at least when it comes to things like this. He just held a fundraiser for Biden like 3 weeks ago. So for Clooney to come out is a major blow. Rob Reiner and Michael Douglas following suit too. These guys are kind of the cabal, the Democratic Hollywood cabal, which
you're playing right into them with that word choice.
Is like as shitty as it is, like Hollywood has become a pretty essential part of the Democratic coalition. Their funding is a major backbone for all candidates. It would be pretty shocking if Biden were to just kind of piss off Hollywood, or, you know, not take their, you know, tell them to go fuck themselves. Essentially, that would be pretty shocking.
Yeah, it'd be like the Republicans telling the church to fuck off. Is kind of
to have George Clooney come out today is a pretty devastating one. It did feel like things were kind of settling down for a few days, and now it kind of feels like the dam is opening it back up again. Nancy Pelosi kind of made some comments. We have more people in the House. The issue is that the White House is just not doing really anything to quell this. I mean, you know, just telling people everything's fine is not really what people need to hear, especially donors, especially people in Congress. You know, they need to see Biden out there. They need to have more assurances than just trust me, bro. And there's more and more there's more and more people in the Senate. He's losing more and more Democrats in the Senate. There's insiders talking about how senators are panicking, especially people in swing districts or swing states. They're just absolutely panicking about what this is going to do to down ballot races. So, I mean, like I said, like I just, if Biden's in it, that's fine. I mean, but he's got to be in it. He's got to be out there fucking campaigning his ass off. And he's got to be the leader of the party, and he's got to be fighting Trump. He cannot, you know, he wasn't in the basement last time, even though that was the
I know,
the talking point. He was actually campaigning last time, but this time it's, you know, it's like he's in the basement. They're running a very, very scaled back campaign. It's very nerve-wracking.
Well, I think that's the point. It's like what he needs to be doing to calm people down, I don't think he's capable of doing. And trying to force him to do it is just going to reinforce the narrative they're trying to back away from. But I think that what they're trying to do is like create a consensus among the Democratic factions, which, you know, is what's happening. And that's what they talked to the governors. They got them together. And for all we know, that meeting was very, you know, hold the line, right? Don't do anything. We're going to talk to all of the other, you know, groups and figure out what we're going to do. But for now, like the official position is, right? Then talk to Congress, the official position. Because there's a lot of like resentment within the Democratic Party voter base about Joe Biden. And I think part of this is that he's trying to say a little bit like he wants to honor the votes of the primary voters or whatever. But like, there's also like twice the Democratic primary would have had more challengers to him than it did, if not for the Democratic Party making decisions. And now he's trying to use voters against the Democratic Party decisions. There's something a little bit annoying about that, like a little bit hubristic, if you will. But I think, you know, George Clooney coming out, I think you'll probably see Nancy Pelosi did come out and say, and it's very, much the exact same situation. And I feel like she had a conversation with Joe to that effect before that statement came out. And
I'd be shocked if she said that off the cuff.
Well, yeah. And I'm thinking George Clooney probably sent a copy of this as well. Like,
I would just, yeah. That's how, that's how, tight knit this group is, I'm sure George Clooney ran it by the White House before he did it. Yeah.
Yeah. You would kind of have to a little bit, for the points you made, right? Like, you don't want to alienate these people or the financial support you get from these people. But the only way, and I was talking to somebody who, like, what happens if they just can't get him to budge, right?
Yeah.
It's the only way you could still do. I still kind of think like the issue, and I'll kind of talk about this more when we get into the deep dive, is that we can frame this very much as it's not about the president, it's about stopping this, right?
Yeah.
So if they structured the campaign in that, right, you're voting for the Democratic ticket, that is Joe Biden. Upon his death or resignation, whatever, that is Kamala Harris, right? Who is on the bench behind her? These are our Democratic governors. Who is on, like, if the campaign starts showing how strong the party itself is, I think people will care less about who's top of the party because they'll understand there's enough to catch it if it falls. I think the concern is this is where we're pinning all our hopes, and we need to say, no. He's just the guy at the front of the line. Your hopes are here, and it's up to Democratic messaging. That's scary.
That should be the convention. It should be like, and it will be because it always is, but it should really be the emphasis on just running out the bench. Every single young Democratic governor, every single popular Democratic member of Congress, give John Ossoff an hour and a half to speak and take his shirt off. I don't care. But the whole point is that
really? That got my attention.
That woke Cathy up.
I was like taking notes. I was like, what teacher, what?
But yeah, you want to like give this idea. You want to like let the public know that we've got a huge lineup of like really, really great candidates. And if they're going to coalesce around Biden, then you're right. It becomes like the party, not just Biden running for president, but you're voting for the Democratic Party with all these really great resources and candidates, and this bench coming up. And I do think that I am still optimistic. I don't. The thing about this is like people are panicking that we're going to make the wrong decision. Like if we go, we have two choices to make, like Biden or Kamala, and if we choose the wrong one, we're going to lose. I don't know that that's true in this case. Trump is still so fucking unpopular, and I still think that the prevailing wisdom is anybody but Trump. I don't think, like, if you swap to Kamala, I don't think people are going to be like, oh, well, I was going to vote for Democrats, but now I'm going to vote for Trump, or I'm not going to vote because I'm worried about like the anti-Trump vote is so strong. It always has been. It's why Biden's president in the first place. Like, let's be honest. Like, Biden got 81 million votes because people hated Trump, not because they love Biden. But I think it's the same if he stays in. I don't think people are going to be like, I think enough people are going to be like, look, the dude's old, but like, he's got people around him. We can't have Donald Trump back in office. You know what I mean? I just, does that make sense? I just don't feel like people are freaking out because they feel like if we're going to screw this up. I don't know. I don't think it changes much, to be honest.
Actually, to that point, I was thinking about this the other day, and the way everybody's freaking out about Joe Biden, I think speaks to how awful Donald Trump is. And that will, I think, eventually get the attention it deserves, because if the alternative to Joe Biden wasn't so fucking horrifying, we would just kind of shrug our shoulders and whatever. But the fact that we understand the severity of it, because the issue will be turnout. It's always turnout with Democrats. Democrats win when people turn out to vote. Republicans win when we don't. Point blank, period. Always. Like Nick Powers, his TikTok, he's been doing like a whole series, and he tagged me in one about Florida, and every single like example election I use in my classroom, he covered, which was amazing. And I just commented, I was like, this has been like the bane of my existence since 537 votes in Broward County, right? Like, since, because like, like the point of the video he tagged me is like, Florida's not really a red state. It's not even really a purple state. It's very much a blue state of very Democrats, right?
This is the worst Democrats.
Well, just like take the cavalier attitude of Democratic voters in general and add the cavalier attitude of a Floridian who lives on the beach. So you have beach bum liberals in Florida. Lots of them. But where are they on election day? Drunk on margaritas on the beach. As they should be. Like, they are living the true dream, but because they're living the dream, Rick Scott wins by like 5 votes.
That's
like
so
Ron
frustrating,
like,
Kathy.
I know.
I blame
do you know
you.
Do you know what it's like to have lived in a state where Democrats outnumbered Republicans at one point, like 1.4 to 1, right? Like 1.5 Democrats for every Republican in the state, and to know that Republicans had been controlling the government for 20 years. I was like, how do we how are there that many more of us, yet they're always in charge? Like, that's how I hate Florida, but I love it because I just, you know what, it's fine.
People rightly terrified of Donald Trump, and Democrats rightly exploiting that, especially around this Project 2025 stuff, which has really kind of come to the forefront. Project 2025 has been a thing for a while now, but it's recently kind of gotten blasted to the forefront of the conversation. Biden campaign all over it, making messaging tying Donald Trump to Project 2025. As Donald Trump tries to shy away from it, which is fucking hilarious.
Yeah, you know it's bad when Donald Trump is like, oh, I don't know. I've never heard of that. You're going to have to ask my lawyer. I don't know who Stormy Daniels is. Like, you know it's bad.
Yeah, he really said he didn't have sex with a porn star. But yeah, Project 2025. So absolutely terrifying. I think what really did it, at least in a lot of ways, you talked about somebody blasting it on the internet. I think what it was the Heritage Foundation's Kevin Roberts, the head of the Heritage Foundation, had just the most dumbass fucking. And this is why Trump eventually backed away from it, because this guy like fucked up his whole thing with this stupid ass interview where he's talking about we're in the process of the second American Revolution that will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be. That's a direct quote. So he's just like, everyone went, whoa, what the fuck are you talking about?
Well, yeah, like that's exactly what it is, because he said that, like, that ends the feature of on the John Oliver show happens around the same time. I can't remember who did what first, right? But you know as well as I do that in American politics, it's the sexy stuff that sells, right? And the stuff that evokes either like hopeful, dreamy, like hearts around your eyes, or the stuff that makes you just want to keep turning the page. And the Project 2025 is the exact kind of sexiness that Democratic voters need to be just like, fuck this shit. Like, when we need to come together for a common cause, we very much can. That's the thing about Democrats. And all we need is something to either collectively hate or collectively hope for. And I think like as inspired as Obama made us, Project 2025 enrages us. So stay tuned, kids.
Well, it's, we've been talking about the authoritarian potentials of Trump from day one, from 2015. And then these idiots went and like put it all down on paper. I mean, even Donald Trump is disciplined enough to not fucking write down these ideas at a 900-page, white paper policy document. But
900 pages too. How obnoxious is that?
Some of the highlights: so getting rid of the Department of Education, giving extraordinary powers to the executive branch, banning abortion, IVF, contraception nationally, banning pornography, identifying, categorizing anything LGBTQ related as pornography, criminalizing transgenderism, criminalizing gender therapy, all that kind of stuff. So just a lot of scary right-wing Handmaid's Tale shit. We always come back to Handmaid's Tale because it's just like they really took their blueprint from it.
Yeah, they really didn't understand who the bad guys were in that show, right? It's like the people who think Darth Vader's the one you're cheering for. I'm like, we're also no, like cool guy, whatever. No, bad guy.
Also firing like thousands of nonpartisan civil servants that work in the federal government, and replacing them with basically like MAGA operative Trump loyalists, like sort of the more hardcore MAGA you are, the more likely you're going to get a job. Basically removing the meritocracy and putting in a party loyalty system like we've never seen that before in the Soviet Union or China or anything like that.
Well, I was literally just pulling up my little book. I was like, hold on, spoils system. What year was that? What election was that one? I was going to compare it to. Like, yeah, we've been here before, kids. Is the point.
Yeah, that always works out so well when you just put people who don't know what they're doing into jobs just because they support you.
No teapot domes ever scandals ever happen. Never.
So really, really scary shit. And they wrote it down. They wrote it down right there. So yeah. Yep. Just and Kevin Roberts is just this, and then for him to come out and be like, guess what, we're doing this, and there's not a goddamn thing you can do about it unless you want to get bloody. So yeah, that's just
once again the kids said bet.
Yeah. Just a brilliant move, Cotton. Let's see if it works out for him.
Well done.
And a couple other stories. So AOC today filing impeachment articles against Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito. That's pretty cool. It's gonna go nowhere, but it's good that somebody finally
at least cares enough to try. Like thank you, for that platitude.
Well, it'll go nowhere while Republicans control the House. I mean, if we take back the House, it might.
Well, yeah, but that's kind of the point. Like, I appreciate, while I know it's going nowhere, I appreciate her at least saying out loud and on record, "This be fucked," because that's essentially what she did.
And then yesterday they announced they're doing a Senate, and they're going to ask Merrick Garland to appoint a special counsel to investigate Clarence Thomas.
Really?
So shit's getting nice. So shit's getting real on that end. I think that would probably happen before any sort of serious impeachment movement took off. They'd have to do sort of an investigation first. Official.
That's probably part of the impeachment. But you know what that might do? That might be one of those situations where it's like, hey, you know what? We can investigate all of the crooked shit you've spent your whole career doing and completely tarnish your legacy for history, or you can resign right now.
That would be a thing. You know what I mean?
I would take it. I'd be like, fuck you. That's good enough for me. Like, he'll die eventually.
Like we have the photographs of you giving reach arounds to some Russian. You may want to just.
Where's the P tape of Clarence Thomas? That's what I need to know.
Oh God, where's the P tape of Trump? That's
in Vladimir Putin's bedstand.
Yeah, in Vladimir Putin's vault, in case he needs it. By the way, the creepy shit about it started in the debate. We were texting about it, but it's kind of continued in some of these Trump rallies where he keeps talking about if he wins, the war will be over. Period, full stop. Yeah, I'm pretty sure some of the language that he used in that debate where he was talking to Vladimir Putin, I'm pretty sure he is having conversations with Putin about if Trump gets elected, immediately ending the war in Ukraine, so that Trump can take credit for that.
Well, I don't think maybe perhaps that's one way of looking at it, or he's having conversations with Vladimir Putin that if he gets reelected, he'll immediately promise American resources to Russia's side, which would, that would do it, right? Like if you're Ukraine and you're facing the Russian army and the American army, what do you do? That's the way.
Well, I think it's like a Ronald Reagan thing where Reagan was, working with the Iranians and to release to benefit his political campaign.
But in that case, Ronald Reagan was the one pulling the strings. And in this one, it's Donald Trump. And I'm sorry, we know my feelings on Ronald Reagan, but he was smarter than Donald Trump. And Vladimir Putin is 100% in the power position between the two of them. And he's not going to end his war when he could talk the other guy into winning his war for him, because Donald Trump will win his war for him because he would have the American military. The American military is such a daunting force in the world that it alone is what has stood against the next world war. The fact that the United States military basically makes everybody slow the fuck down. And that sounds obnoxious, but that's basically what we are.
Well, along those lines, there was the 75th anniversary NATO summit this week. Today, Biden was there with they're meeting with the other NATO leaders. Trump said in a speech, or actually said it on a Truth Social post, that there would be no NATO without Donald Trump. Still harping on this weird idea that he made all the nations pay up, as if NATO is some sort of American protection racket.
As if it hasn't existed for 80 years. There'd be no NATO without me. There was a NATO before you were born, sir. Right? Not before Joe was born, but still. No. That's what Joe Biden should say. I'm so old, I brought NATO into fruition. It's as old as me. I'm just saying.
I predate NATO, motherfucker.
I remember the world before NATO. It was shit because he was literally in diapers. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, God. Oh, poor guy. He's old.
I'm sorry, Joe.
Biden meeting with NATO. So yeah, I mean, you had these, NATO looking at the potential Trump, ending the alliance. He's an existential threat to the alliance, like you were saying. Like, he would definitely sort of be on Russia's side of this whole thing. You've also got Orban there sitting there in NATO. You've got Meloni from Italy sitting there in NATO. You don't, however, have Marine Le Pen from France because she just came in third place. Her party just came in third place in the French elections, which is amazing. You also had the Tories going down in flames in the UK, which we predicted. Kathy's super excited about that. The French one, a little bit more surprising that happened.
I called that one. Remember, I told you the French people will not elect fascists because they like being French too much. I called that one once again.
Shocking results over the weekend. The Marine Le Pen's National Rally Party, which is basically the party of like the Vichy Nazis, the French Nazi sympathizers. Marine Le Pen's father, who was like one of the founders of the party, was like a Holocaust denier, all this kind of shit. They did really well in the European Union elections, and they did really well in the first round of parliamentary voting this weekend. And then in the second round, it all went to shit. You had the far left coalition of Jean-Luc Mélenchon forming an alliance with French President Emmanuel Macron to keep Le Pen out. So you had the far left and the center kind of coming together, making a deal. The result was that the leftists came in first place, the centrists came in second, and Le Pen's far right National Rally came in third. So surprising results. Lots of hilarious videos of the moment when the National Rally people learned that they had come in third place. The joy just wiped off their Nazi little faces. It's just
quite literally, actually.
Yeah. So interesting stuff. So I think we're going to go into a deep dive on these European elections now, talking UK and talking France and maybe even a couple others. We're going to be talking about the different parties in Europe and how their election systems differ from the United States. And I think the biggest takeaway for me in this is that these are nations that have multi-party systems. You could really see the difference when you have, especially in France, where you just have tons of different political parties. You're talking about coalitions of parties, not just parties. When you have these three major blocks of the left, the center, and the right, these are coalitions of parties, not just singular parties. So a lot of different places to support and a lot of different parties to choose from. But I'm gonna kick it over to Kathy. We're gonna do a little deep dive now, and we'll see where we get with this. And some of this will probably end up on the Patreon there. But here we have another PowerPoint. Kathy with the PowerPoints.
Here's the thing, though. Like, not only will this one, this could turn into so many different things because there's so much in my brain. Like, I could relate this to the French Revolution, even because France just they just kind of prevented a little revolution because they learned their lesson, if you will. So
I guess.
Way
to go, France! By the way, there were so many people. Speaking of people like spooked and like scared into voting and knowing what the stakes were, that was really what just happened in France with not allowing these, this Marine Le Pen's party to come into power there.
Well, we'll get there. All right. So we're going to start in Britain, though. Okay. So this is a little bit of a comparative politics lesson mixed in because I want to explain the different structures of the government and how the different electoral systems work, because our elections are not the same as the rest of the world. No. And ours are not even the weirdest, which is weird.
That's a good way to start.
How elections work across the pond. So Britain, for those who don't know, and I only do this because I teach like seniors in high school who I go in assuming know this, and they do not know this. So I'm going to make sure from the gate we all know this. Britain, like the United Kingdom, is 4 different countries. It is not just one country. It is 4 different countries, which complicates the governments, okay, greatly. So it is the nation of England, the nation of Scotland, the nation of Wales, and Northern Ireland, which is the chunk of the islands that the British were able to hold on to after like centuries of back and forth. All right, there you go.
I can do a Northern Ireland deep dive at some point. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, because Northern, I get very like personally invested in it. So I can't be unbiased. I can't teach about Ireland in an unbiased way. And as an educator, that means I avoid teaching about it. Does that make sense? Like I can't do this without saying very bad things about Oliver Cromwell. very bad things.
It's
that
a
all
trip.
crumbled.
Northern Ireland is a trip, but yeah, it is. It is.
It
Northern
is.
Ireland is a part of the United Kingdom. It is not a
Indeed.
separate country.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
it's a
and
separate.
because
It's a separate entity of the United Kingdom.
yeah. So, and because of this, they hold their own elections. So, in a similar way that like states hold their own elections, Scotland holds their own elections, right? And just like Florida has its own government and Texas has its own government and so on and so forth, so too does like England, Scotland, and all of them, right? So,
Northern Ireland just getting one in 1998 as a result of the Good Friday Agreement. They had their own,
right.
Before they didn't because it was dissolved.
Yeah, so that's their Northern Ireland Assembly, which is there. There's also the Welsh Parliament, the Scottish Parliament, and then the House of Commons. So the House of Commons is England's government, the Scottish Parliament is Scotland's government, so on and so forth, right? And then within the UK, they also have local authorities because, you know, that's kind of like their like municipalities, city, like that kind of shit, right? Like London needs a mayor. Okay, so that's that. So they use a system called, you can see how much of a teacher I am, right? In this slide alone shows you, if nothing else, that I am a public educator right here. First past the post. I have horsey races for those.
Why? It looks like you made it with no money. Like
that too. All the artwork I stole from the internet.
It's like clip art from back in the day.
Basically, yeah. I stole a few pictures from news stories, but I'll tell you where I stole them all. That way it counts, right? That's all you got to do. I stole this. That's called citations, kids.
You just got to say where you stole it from. That's the only.
You can steal whatever you want as long as you admit it. It's fine. So a first past the post election is basically the person with the most votes wins, right? Same idea. Like if you're playing Red Rover, whoever crosses the line first wins, right? So that is how it works. If I get 412 votes, you get 411 votes, I win all of it. Yay me, I get it all.
So the name's a little confusing. It doesn't mean like you have to hit a certain number of votes. It just means you have to get the most votes.
Yeah, it's just like which one of you, when the numbers are counted, have the most numbers. Ta-da. It's a system that with a multi-party system can create a problem. If you had a winner-take-all first past the post system in a 5-party system and the winner potentially got 23% of the vote because of so many parties, that would make you just as pissed as the system we have now.
Yes, it would.
Assure you. Okay.
And that's the argument for not having like dozens of parties, maybe 3 or 4, but not 25 parties, because then you end up with problems. You end up with Hitler, who won with like 23% of the vote.
Or you end up with an electoral system like fucking France. Okay.
Exactly. In France, yeah, it's a mess.
Like that's just a preview of where we're going. I'm starting with Britain because
it's an absolute
we have to go to fucking France. Actually, they did something really interesting. So France would have been way worse to explain to you had France not done something awesome. So it's rare that I get to say positive things about the French. Today's one of those days. There you go. Okay, so the elections that use first past the post is the House of Commons, which is the one we're going to be talking about, the mayor elections and their local elections. So that's like the bulk of them. Now, the House of Lords use a different system entirely, but we're not going to talk much about the House of Lords today because their elections didn't happen, don't matter, and are just, the gentry picking other gentry.
We also talked about them on the deep dive a few episodes ago. We covered the upper houses.
Yeah, so I have it here just like as a quick, remember this is a thing, but it doesn't matter to anything you're learning today, okay?
Now we're talking commons. We're talking where the actual power is.
Yes. So they have a parliamentary system with a constitutional monarch, okay? So their head of state is King Charles. And how it works is after the elections, the king calls the prime minister, right? And the prime minister is elected by the House of Commons as the person, like the group that has the most votes, right? So within the lower house, there are 650 members, and the breakdown is on the screen. So I'll read the big important ones to you, but they're all here. So the person with the most, the party with the most representation in the House of Commons will elect your prime minister. So that's just like Speaker of the House, all right? So we're following like the parallels in the government, right? King Charles is not existing in America. Okay, the prime minister functions a little bit like the president, and then the House of Commons is a little bit like the House of Representatives, and the House of Lords is a little bit like the Senate, except this is king version. So if like the MAGAs get their way, it would be Donald Trump and then his little peons and then whatever fucking government they form from there.
Well, okay? the genius of this system remains that the head of state and the head of government are two separate things. So that the head of state ideally stays above politics, which is the king in the UK is the king stays above politics.
We'll see though, because it's just Charles.
In the in the US, it's the same person. It's the president is the head of state and the head of government. So we politicize our heads of state, which I think is the root of a lot of our problems. But we can cover
It
that at a
is.
different time.
Like, truthfully, a small side tangent is like the war in Israel, for example, we would be blaming on King Charles and the government would be like, Charles, you got to fucking stop this, right? Instead of Joe Biden having to simultaneously take responsibility on the world stage and negotiate a change to the world stage. That's a hard position to have when it's both, right?
Or conversely, like if the government is fucking up, the head of, we can all turn to the head of state and be like, look, like this is not, this government
this parliament
sucks.
Chuck.
Yeah.
Like I was like when Charles first got sworn in, I was thinking he was going to do that. I was like, King's name Charles, love to fucking dissolve parliament, right? Remember they were trying to call for an early general election when fucking Liz Truss had her 12 days in office. I was like, how funny would it be if they get a king named Charles who immediately dissolves parliament and calls for new elections? That is history, guys.
Yeah.
But that's just me being a nerd. But anyway, out of this election, so of the 650 members in the House of Lords, 411 of them went to the Labor Party. I just want you to digest that number, like how much of a fucking landslide that is.
What's the math? 323 needed for a majority. They got they got 411.
So, 411 of 650. So it was a fucking slaughter. Okay,
it was brutal. It was a bloodbath.
Like the conservatives lost 2/3 of their vote share. You'll see, like I have it on a slide later. But they're left with only 121 members, down from like the nearly 300 they had.
It was the worst loss ever. It was the worst, like in terms of seats lost. It was the worst loss ever. Well, in modern history, like I think in 1922, they had a pretty rough year as well. But like there were fewer members then. So in sheer nominal numbers, yes. But there have been previous slaughters. Let's just but it's been 100 years. Like there's been literal slaughters in Parliament too. But that's a whole.
There's also that. Now the story here, like the secondary story from the slaughter of the conservatives and the takeover of Labor, is the Reform Party. Okay, now on the screen for those looking, they only have 5 seats in the House of Commons, but they were the top 3 vote getter. Okay, and again, remember first past the post, so they were collecting a lot of votes, but just like Republicans in California kind of don't matter. A lot of reform voters didn't matter because they lost their constituencies, therefore didn't get a lot of members. However, they had 1 before and now they have 5. So while they don't have a lot, that's a big jump, right? That's a huge increase in their influence. You go from 1 crazy guy to 5 crazy guys. 5 crazy guys are louder than 1 crazy guy, no matter how big the room is. Get me? You get me a little bit? So I'm not... Go ahead.
We were texting about this. So they didn't get that many seats. They didn't do well in terms of like, they didn't get that many seats, but they were doing extremely well in terms of vote share. In a lot of these races, they were coming in second. You had the Labor candidate winning, but then the Reform candidate, like the MAGA candidate, was coming in second. So they were beating the conservatives, the Tories. Not enough votes to win the seat, but their vote share was enormous for how new that party is and how small they are, which is scary. I mean, that is the secondary takeaway of the evening, was that the British MAGA did better than expected.
Well, yeah, and I've been getting a lot of questions about it too, and I was like, there's a little bit to this. Like, you're hearing people talk about Reform UK, and it's got people thinking like, oh, so Britain's still right wing. No, the Labour Party is very much a center left party. Think 1990s Democrats. That's the Labour Party right now, right? Are they as left wing as they used to be? Absolutely not. That's why there are other parties that we will get to, right? But like a good comparison is 90s Republicans, or even Obama era Democrats. 90s era Democrats, Obama era Democrats. They're very center left, right? Which is we're going to change things, but don't worry, we're going to go slowly, old people. That's kind of how the Labor Party rolls. Okay. I'm going to kind of, for those who care, I have the PowerPoint up here. I have a little bit of a breakdown of the House of Lords. What's interesting about the House of Lords that I do want to cover is it's the only house in a bicameral legislature in the world that's larger than its lower house counterpart. Which tells you a lot about fucking England, right? Because
fucking
the House
English.
of Lords,
God
right?
damn it.
Because like there's 783 sitting members, of which, and this is my favorite part, 92 are hereditary members. Like that basically means my daddy did this and my granddaddy did this all the way back to when Lancashire was just the farm and my father collected payments from the serfs, right? Like that's hereditary. Like it's not quite that bad, but you get the idea, right? Like it's remnants of the old gentry, okay, is the House of Lords. They are elected by each other. Okay, like the people have no say in what happens in the House of Lords, right? Like, and that's
they also don't. They also can't vote for the House of Commons. So
right, so they also don't have any bill. Like they can slow things down, but they can't stop anything. So the way our Senate can filibuster a bill to death, all the House of Lords can do is be like, "Are you sure though?" Okay, well, I have another question. So like they have to address all their questions. So they can ask questions, whatever, but there's like a deadline. I think I wrote it down here. Where did I put it? I wrote it down, and the fan might have blown it away.
But I also mean like they don't vote. Like the members of the House of Lords don't vote for the House of Commons, like in the elections. Right. Like the two groups that can't vote in the UK are felons and the House of Lords. The House of Lords elect themselves, but they cannot vote for members of the House of Commons.
Yeah, they can't vote for anything else. But they also have a limit to how delayed it can be. So they can slow things down for, I want to say it was like 110 days. I wrote it down, but it's on one of these pieces of paper. I didn't think it would come up.
Very ceremonial.
Yeah, so that's what it is. It's just like we're old and we're here, kind of, right? And then so there's more information on like the makeup of the House of Lords, but you can see how ideologically different it is, right? I told you 411 sitting House or Labor members in the House of Lords right now, or in the House of Commons right now. And of the 783, there's only 172 Labor representatives in the House of Lords, but there are 274 conservatives. But what's also interesting there is they have 179 what are called crossbenchers, which are swing voters, essentially, right? So they kind of like don't have any hardline position, but are wishy-washy collectively. So instead of just independently being wishy-washy on specific things, they're collectively wishy-washy on the same specific things. Does that kind of make sense a little bit?
They're swingers.
Like, yeah, there you go. Fine. They're swingers if we need to go. There it is. So to the parties. The political parties as they break down. The parties that or the one that just got completely slaughtered. And I love this. They're called the Conservative Party, but like they're the Tories for all intents and purposes. The official Tory party is long gone, but not really, if you get me, right? It's still these fuckers. They are very similar to the Republican Party of America and have been. They followed kind of the same trajectory until Donald Trump. And that's where the Tories have very much tried to court the crazies, but reform became the crazies. Does that make sense? Like, because Tories are still very proper and populism is not proper. So Tories have the same like hateful ideology, but like want doilies and teacups, whereas reform want to be hateful and assholes. So it's reform are drunk in a bar conservatives, and like the Tories are country club like conservatives. Does that make sense?
It does, actually. And it's what happens when you have a multi-party system, because I am sure that there would be a MAGA party by now if they would have broken off from the Republican Party by now.
Well, they basically just absorbed it, is what it is.
Well, they absorbed it. That's what happens, is that they just took it over.
Yes. Yeah. So the reason they were slaughtered so badly in this election is because like they've always loved their free markets. They've always like hated feeding kids at lunch. That's a Margaret Thatcher era kind of position. But they destroyed the National Health Service in the middle of a pandemic. They destroyed public housing that had saved Britain after the wars. And they cry about immigrants and woke kids, because that's who's to blame. It's not the fact that they're privatizing healthcare. No. It's definitely the people we're going to send to Rwanda. That's their plan, is to pack them up and send them to Rwanda.
They gutted public services. They have sewage in the river. They have like the sewage in the river problem.
Thames. Yeah, it's like bad. Like and like I said, the policies of the Conservative Party, they go. It's like Thatcher era policies, and all you've been able to see from Labor, and this is the criticism they get in Britain since Margaret Thatcher, is that they have been able to slow the bleed of what the Tories have done to the country at various times by themselves moving to the center. Which doesn't that sound familiar? It's what drives us crazy.
It's funny. It's because Labor historically suffered under that like fear of the leftists and like what the left were going to do to the economy, but it was starting with Thatcher. It was always the conservatives that blew up the economy, and it had to be like Labor that kind of soft walked it back. So it's interesting.
It was always that way. It's just during 2 world wars, everyone forgot. I don't know.
Well, that's true.
But the story of them in the last 14 years, I like to call musical prime ministers. Okay. Okay. Because David Cameron was their prime minister from when they took power in 2010. Which is kind of like a bark back to the recession, because Tony Blair was the prime minister, just like George W. Bush kind of took the hit in America, even though it was his fault. Like Republicans took the hit for the recession in America because they were the party in control when it happened. Labor was the party in control when the Great Recession happened in the UK. So they took the blame for it, even though it was America's financial sector. Like it had nothing to do, not nothing, but you know what I mean, right?
Well, Blair also backed Bush in the Iraq War, and that almost destroyed his entire legacy. People were so mad about that.
There was also that one. I had conveniently pushed that out of my brain. Thanks for bringing that one back. Now I'm pissed again. See that? Anyway, it's fine. So David Cameron takes power in 2010, and he is the prime minister through the Brexit fight. Now, for those of us in the know, when Brexit went through in the UK, that was the first panic attack I had that Trump was possible. I was like, oh, fuck, this is not good. Because the parallels in our politics have been such that that was the bellwether we should have paid attention to and didn't. So I want us to pay attention to this one. Hint, hint, wink, wink, foreshadow. But David Cameron was against the Brexit movement. But when Brexit was voted in, he resigned from the role of prime minister because he's like, well, fuck this. I'm not going to oversee this thing I don't agree with. You want to do this, literally eat a dick, do it yourselves. Right?
I remember that. He was like, fuck you. Like, I'm not going to lead my country out of the European Union. I don't want to do that. Like, I'm not in charge of this right now.
It was in a very similar way to like when Kevin McCarthy got kicked out of the speakership, where he's like, fuck you, I'm going home then. You know what? You guys fucking suck. I'm not
take my ball and fucking go home.
I'm going fucking home. Yeah. So that's basically what that was. So in comes Theresa May, who tries to come up with a plan for Brexit. Like several plans are introduced. Every single one of them fails.
Woefully unqualified, but she was not good.
Well, I mean, as far as Tory prime ministers go, she's
better than what came after her, for sure.
No, for her. But Theresa May's prime ministership was very much damaged by the one that followed her, and that's Boris Johnson, because he was one of the proponents pushing Brexit when it was on the ballot. And he wanted to be the prime minister, but he was at the time mayor of London, and everyone kind of called him Britain's Donald Trump because he's a fucking Looney Tune. Like, he had the crazy hair and everything, right? The sweaty fat guy with bad hair. It's the whole vibe, right?
Philanderer vibe.
So he was
fucking everything that moves, kind of thing.
Yeah, basically. So he was super critical of every plan put forward by Theresa May until nothing could come through. And she ends up getting the no confidence called in. Boris Johnson comes in 2019, pushes his Brexit plan through December of 2019. Great fucking timing. Not a bad time to disrupt your local economy in any way, shape, or form. There will be no dire consequences to that decision, will there be, Boris? So amid a global pandemic, he basically took the British economy and shook it upside down looking for quarters in his jeans, right? So it went badly, to say the least. Then he was caught partying during the pandemic, Partygate, and that was done. That was Boris done.
Yeah.
He was crazy. Which brings us to everyone's favorite salad bar.
The head of lettuce herself.
Liz Truss. So when Boris Johnson gets booted from the party, Liz Truss gets put up. She basically comes in here like, I want to be Margaret Thatcher when I grow up, and basically released an economic plan, how I'm going to fix the fucked up economy, and basically releases Margaret Thatcher's 1979 platform. I'm going to cut all the social services and tell everyone to fuck off. And like the whole country was like, that's the opposite of what will help us. And it was like such a bad economic plan that their markets collapsed in like 12 days. And her prime ministership lasted 44 days. She was such a fucking joke that there was a YouTube channel, I think, where somebody got a head of iceberg lettuce, put a fucking wig on it, and put a camera up there and a clock to see if the lettuce would rot before Liz Truss lost her job. And the lettuce did not rot before Liz Truss lost her
lettuce one.
job. Lettuce won, and it's one of my favorite things.
Just the response to her plan crashed the markets. They didn't even get a chance to like implement any of it. Yeah.
It was basically not this shit again. Like the collective response to Liz Truss was not this shit again. And was the call like, we need a general election early. So they've been demanding a general election since Liz Truss was put into the prime ministership. So they put in Rishi Sunak, who this motherfucker is what was the guy who was running for president in the Republican Party?
Vivek Ramaswamy.
Yeah, he's basically Britain's Ramaswamy, right? Like a
rich guy.
Rich guy, Nepo kid who didn't actually achieve anything himself, but would convince you that he like invented the wheel, right? He's entitled, a dick face. We all hate him. He sucks.
The end of the story on Truss was that she lost her seat. She lost.
She did.
She was.
She's
no longer in Parliament, which is
too.
Yeah.
I can't even remember because I was so excited about everybody losing their seats. Did Sunak keep his seat?
Yeah, he did, but he won his seat, but he stepped down as conservative leader.
Yeah, that's what it was. But there was another fucking crazy Tory guy whose name is jumping out of my brain in this moment, but he lost his seat and I was delighted with it. You know the guy, he's got like the horse face and the black glasses. His name is not coming to my head. I think I know
who you're talking about. Yeah.
I'll be halfway through the French elections and it'll jump in my head. Watch, that's what's going to happen. So anyway, that clusterfuck led to the British elections going the way they did. So the new party in power in Britain is the Labour Party, which is the center-left party. Like I said, our modern Democratic Party. Like their Keir Starmer is very, I think that's how you say his name. Starmer. Whatever. Starmer. I always say it wrong. But he is just basically Gavin Newsom, I guess is probably the best comparison or like ideological counterpart I could give. A moderate, doesn't really offend anybody, but is willing and capable of getting progressive shit done.
But bland is good in England.
Bland is good when everything is scary. Yeah, right. And their party has kind of followed a similar track that the Democrats have, right? So our Bill Clinton was there, Tony Blair. So, you kind of get the idea. And they have been given a huge mandate for power, and boy, are they using it. They like hit the ground running, right? So it'll be really interesting to see what comes out of them in the coming days and weeks. And hopefully what they're able to accomplish can give us some hope. Like, hey, huge landslide victories with Labor allowed Labor to do this. Do that for Democrats.
The other interesting thing on Labor is that they do waffle between left and center left. For a long time during this Tory rule, they were under the control of Jeremy Corbyn, who is a far left guy. And he brought the Labor Party back to sort of its socialist roots and spooked everybody and freaked everybody out that Labor would never win another election as long as Jeremy Corbyn was in charge. So they booted him out. And
I like Jeremy Corbyn. He was like the Bernie Sanders counterpart. Yeah, he is the Bernie Sanders counterpart, I would say, ideologically, right? Like just like Bernie Sanders was like, yo, Democrats, you used to care about working people, right? Jeremy Corbyn was a little bit the same. Like, remember when we provided stuff for people?
I would agree to an extent. I have a lot more respect for Bernie Sanders than I do for Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn also had some like anti-Semitism stuff.
Well, he had some anti-Israel stuff, which, as we know, gets very easily converted.
He had some comments that were pretty like
maybe I don't know but the point is that they went looking for something on him because they were scared of how left he was pulling Labor. So in a similar way, whether it's true or not, probably, I mean, maybe he's a politician, so do I have faith in any of them? Not really. Like, would I believe awful shit?
Anyway, the point is that they went back to the center left with Keir Starmer.
Well, and kind of the question is are they going to stay center left? Like, he was a good way of pulling in center voters back to Labor. But the question is, what will Labor do now that they have the power? Because I'm of the opinion, same with Democrats, that the reason they play the center is to win the voters. But once they get the power, they actually do stuff, right? So,
they still encompass the left. I mean, just because the leadership is more centrist, they don't have the far left, but they still encompass a lot of like the people that are further like in the social democratic realm too.
Yeah, like I tend to like my like heads of the like I like center left presidents and I like far left congresses, if that makes sense. Because
but again, like I said, like everyone's always worried about, again, with the Corbyn stuff too. Like everybody was always worried that Corbyn and Labor would blow up the economy, but the conservatives blew up the economy. Like
all the time.
As they were talking about it, the Tories were blowing up the economy.
Yeah, I know. It's always great. So the real story out of here is the Reform Party, which is their far right populist party. And to show you how new of a movement this is and kind of where it is a response to. And most of these political disruptions are still kind of aftershocks of the Great Recession, believe it or not. Like, I know it feels like it was a long time ago, but we're still kind of paying the political price for how badly that screwed up the global economy, because it was the global economy that was impacted there. So that's kind of what reform is. It's just all of that anger and frustration from people who got fucked during the recession, who weren't helped with the recovery. So now they have something to be bitter about. And it's just, hey, I'm a rich asshole and I will give you people to blame everything on. And just like in America, reform picked LGBTQ people, immigrants, and people who like energy policies. So, you know, same crap. Just
all of our problems come
British
from
accent.
immigrants. That crowd,
obviously, right? And they were the Brexit party, which the Tories had kind of adopted, and the Tories were able to kind of keep power over the Brexit party for a little while until COVID, because just like in America, how there were anti-maskers, anti-vaxxers, all of the crazies who hated all of the shutdowns and the mandates. Obviously, the same crowd existed in Britain, and the Reform Party was there to be like, come here, we will organize your hatred. And that is Nigel Farage, this motherfucker down here, who like has the most punchable face. Like, just tell me you don't want to punch that face. I want to punch that face so bad.
He is pretty bad.
I want his lunch money. That's what I want. I want to be like, you know, come here, Nigel. Like, I want to bully him on the playground so badly.
These are ugly, ugly dudes in turn. Well, both outside and in, but they're
outside and in.
There's a real ugliness to that movement.
There is indeed. So I think so now just the other parties that exist in Britain who have smaller coalitions, just so you know who they are. There's the Liberal Democrats, which are like their center party, founded in 88. Again, they were basically like, all right, so Margaret Thatcher's fucking crazy and everyone's scared of our left-wing policies. Let's do something. So they basically formed an electoral alliance, which is going to you'll see a similar thing happening in France this year. So it was their Social Democratic Party, which were like a center left, their Liberal Party, old school Whigs, and an offshoot of the Labour Party that was kind of fracturing in that kind of realignment of the 1980s. And they became the Liberal Democratic Party. Ed Davey is their leader now. He calls himself an Orange Book liberal. So to that, I would say you've heard people say like yellow dog Democrat, right? Like, I believe in these things and these things. Like, that's who he is.
They're just pure sort of centrist, like kind of can be whatever they want to be. They're very ineffectual. I don't know. They haven't achieved much.
Truthfully, they're a lot like the 90s Democratic Congress.
Okay.
Right? Like, not the Democratic presidency, right? Like Bill Clinton versus the Democrats he was working with in Congress, who didn't have his back, weren't able to accomplish anything, were so kind of wishy-washy and couldn't hold a position. That is the Liberal Democrats. Okay. That is who they are.
It's kind of helpful to understand, like in Europe, you basically have, you do have a center, a left, and a right sort of track. Labor, and they're usually color coded, which makes it helpful. So you have red, which is the left in Europe, and that's Labor. You have blue, which is the right in Europe, and that's the Conservatives. And then usually a lot of times the sort of centrist party, which in Europe, liberal means like centrist or neoliberal. They're always in gold or yellow.
So where was I? I'm on the wrong screen now. So, and then they have a Green Party, which is your standard issue Green Party, right? If you one Green Party, you know them all, right? So I have a graphic on the screen right now for those of you watching, but for those of you listening at home, I'll kind of give you an idea, and it shows just like the swings in the vote, right? So the wonderful Conservatives you see went from having 43.6% of the vote share back in their 2019 election to 23.7% in the most recent election, which is so pretty to see. Like, doesn't that just make you so happy to see? It's the happiest thing in the world. But what's also interesting is notice, I remember I said Labor picked up tons of seats, 411 seats in the House of Commons, but their vote share barely moved, which is kind of showing that, like, the way Democrats kind of struggle with gerrymandering here, Labor has struggled in a similar way, that they have a solid chunk of voters, just in such positions and places that it's kind of been diminished, because their vote total in 19 was 32.2 and it jumped up to 33.8. So like to pick up as many seats as they did with that little of the vote shows that it was very much a fuck the Tories election. This entire election was fuck the Tories. And Labor just benefited from that, because you can see the only real shift that matters is the downward one to conservatives. You do see a huge jump in the hard right reform from 2% of the vote share to 14% of the vote share, or 14.3. And like I said, 14% of the vote's not a lot, but it is when it started at 2.
when you go from 0, it's actually it's pretty significant.
Yeah. So like that's what you should be looking at. And that is, but what is also interesting is that with the center right losing so much support and the hard right picking up support, what you can kind of see is that the hard right is probably not as hard as the party is. Like the party itself, the policies they would want are probably a lot more extreme than the people who voted for that party are. A lot of those votes, and what'll be interesting to see is how many of them are conservatives who were mad at the Tories who wouldn't vote for Labor, right? Because there's political history between conservatives and Labor. There's political history between Labor, like just like Democrats won't vote for Republicans. There are conservatives who won't vote for Labor. Like Christ himself could run on the Labor ticket and they'd be like, no, fuck you, reform, right? Just like the people here in this country have their way of doing it, right? So like those kind of people exist all over the place. So that is the UK election. Is that good? Ready for France? Okay, so how elections work there is it's done in 2 rounds, which is basically exactly how we do it here. They just do it in a week instead of 6 months.
Like
so we have a
versus general.
We have a primary and we have a general, and their first round elections just basically anyone who doesn't hit this percentage of the vote, fuck you, you're out. Round 2, pick the candidate you want, which is basically what our primaries are. It's just they do it within 10 days instead of 6 months, so it feels like feels like it happens quicker, because their entire election cycle is like 8 weeks. Like, what would that be like? I would love to know. Fucking 8 year
instead of like
primaries.
3 years. Yeah.
God, yeah. Like the fucking what do they call it? The blind primary or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just too long. All right. So how they break down their political, they have a lot of political parties, okay? But
so many.
the difference between their parties are like 3 things, and that's why there's so fucking many of them, right? But that's kind of what's the takeaway here, right? So there's the National Rally Party, which is Marie Le Pen, right? Which is MAGA, so we know what they believe. So they're Reform, so we know what they believe. It's the same thing. But the story of the day is the New Popular Front, which existed, which only was founded in June of this year. Like, they are brand fucking new, okay? And they literally only exist to stop the National Rally Party. So essentially what happened in France was the left wing had a ton of different parties that basically all want the same thing, but have different ideas how to get there. Therefore, they get nothing done and make everybody mad. Gosh, there's a pattern here.
I've never heard of that before.
Like, it's The Good Place, I'm telling you, right? It's like they have all the best intentions. They would do the best thing for you, but they can't get out of their own fucking way to do it, right? We're going to form a 400-year committee to study the problem, right? Oh, I spoke out of turn. Like, that is who they are, right? But the French people, at least, pulled their heads out of their asses, and they were like, okay, this Marie Le Pen bitch is crazy. We remember the Vichy government, and we also remember revolutions. Like, blood in the streets isn't as fun as the history books make it sound, kids. So basically, the left-wing parties all got together and were like, all right. And kind of came together, formed an alliance, created this new party, and all of their voters voted for that party. So it was basically like, we're stronger together than we are apart. It was join or die time for French political parties on the left, and they basically said, all right, come together. So socialists, ecologists,
good for them.
French communists, right? And French communists, it's not fucking Stalin communists. It's basically like give kids healthcare communists. Yeah. It's wild. And then La France, I can't say anything in French, but in sommet, whatever. Fuck French people. I don't know. No, I'm sorry. I can't say French.
Unbowed?
No, Insoumise, I don't know how to say it. It was one of their big parties, but they're gone now. And then the third large group was Macron's alliance, which is the Ensemble Party, which literally means together, because of course it does. Fucking French.
Yeah, and the centrists sort of just
existing. This is somewhere between center left and center right, depending on what's popular in a given moment. They're the opportunists of French politics, because of course they are. And what's funny about them is they are an alliance within an alliance.
Yeah, it's nothing but just alliances of alliances.
Yeah, so it's the and I have it on the list too. It's the Renaissance Party, which is center left, then the Democratic Movement, which is center right, with the Horizon Party, which is center right, with the Progressive Federation, which is an alliance within this alliance of the humanists and the fucking environmentalists, right? So
Fucking
like they're
French.
all
God damn it.
yeah, so they're all here together in this. So basically what you see happen is that the center has been very organized and the right was very organized with the national rally. So the left in the country was basically like, look, we can either keep squabbling amongst ourselves and choose between Emmanuel Macron, who's so French people hate him, or elect the literal like leftover Nazis. So that's the story that I think American voters should take, is that they saw a greater threat than their individual desires. So like, get your shit together. And like the French people did not vote for the new Popular Front. They did not vote for Emmanuel Macron. They didn't vote against Emmanuel Macron. They voted against the National Rally. Basically, they're more scared of right-wing populism than they are angry at Emmanuel Macron. And they're really angry at Emmanuel Macron. Okay, that's how scary the new rally party is.
Yeah, and if they good point. I mean, if they hadn't come together like that, all indications is that National Rally was going to do very well in this election. And Macron's coalition was before this election was the ruling coalition. So they're also like in control of the government at a period where people are really, really mad at the government. So
yeah, and you can see, so on the graphic on the screen for those watching, you can see yellow is the Macron alliance going into the election, and that has very much changed after the election. So there's Emmanuel Macron. I have a good picture of him, and I literally said he's so French people don't like him. So because like the criticisms of the election is like, look, you're not in touch with the French people. You talk down to us like you're like so much better than us. You don't care about rising crime. You're not doing anything about inflation, and they were really, really pissed at him. So a lot of people thought that the French election would go like the British election, like very anti-incumbent, like just vote out the fucking power or whatever, which would have benefited Marie Le Pen's party. And that was the fear. But the left of France was smart enough to not be stupid. And they were like, all right, look, we're pissed at Emmanuel Macron and we would love to send a message to him. Just like a lot of people here are pissed at Joe Biden and you'd love to send a message to him. But are you more scared of Donald Trump or more pissed at Emmanuel Macron? Right. So they're more scared.
Yeah.
Well, really, because remember, France was conquered by the Nazis in like 15 minutes, and like they don't not remember that. Right. And when you've got people like wanting to return their country because they lived under Nazi rule, they lived under Nazi occupation for the duration of World War II. So French people are familiar with what living in a fascist government is like, and they're like
intimately.
Yeah. So like enough for left-wing people who we all know are very stubborn and idealistic, enough for them to put their personal grievance aside and unite against a common enemy. And French people, French leftists united against the new rally party. That is how bad
they united with centrists, basically. I mean, that's pretty,
My message to you, dear listeners, is you don't want to be worse than the French, right? Like even the French can figure this out. I don't want to be dumber than France. Please don't let us be dumber.
The multi-party system allows for that, where you don't have to convince all these people to coalesce under one party. You can just get different coalitions and different parties to form loose alliances for this election. Just keep that one party from gaining too many seats, and then you can sort your shit out after. But you know that it doesn't. Well, it's a little bit more. It's more complicated. I mean, it's not more complicated, but it's different trying to get all these people under one tent. You know,
it is. But like to that point, what's also interesting about this is that France has kind of been famous for its multi-party system, right? But what they kind of just did was abandon it, because if you think about it, they went from a multi-party system to a 3-party system.
Yeah, 3.
And it's still more than a 2-party system, but that's essentially what they've done. Is they have a center party, a hard right party, and a left alliance. And that's really interesting. So it's sort of like, where do you hit the point of diminishing returns in a proportional system? France is kind of showing us. So what we have in these elections is the bellwether of what the left center-left party in Britain is going to be able to do with as much power as they were given can be a message to us. Like, if you're willing to give Democrats that much power, we can do that too. And the same message from France is, I understand that your candidate might not be awesome, exciting, and you might not like him, but there's a larger threat looming. So those are the two takeaway messages here, which are what Americans need to hear so badly right now.
I think this is the natural formation in the MAGA sort of Trump world, where you are going to see marriages of necessity like this, if they permit it to happen, if the center and the left can get over their shit and come together, because this is a microcosm for the United States too. Like you were saying, like, you know, essentially the natural response is going to be to have three parties.
Yep.
You know, a left, a center, and a far right, and the left and center are going to have to work their shit out if they want to keep the far right out.
Yep. Yeah. And like, what's really interesting about this is it's Britain, France, and the United States again facing Nazis. It's literally the Allied powers, guys, right? And the first two powers just told us what to do. And just like in the war, we're going to show up at the end of the race, right? Because they had their elections here in the summertime. They're going to be working toward saving their democracies for 6 months before we even get to vote, right? But just like we came in World War II at the end and saved shit, we can come in November and we can lock down the Allied powers and once again defeat fascism. This time without guns. This time all you gotta do is bubble a box. So Granddad had to storm a beach. Like, he had to walk 10 miles in the snow. All you gotta do is go to the fucking polls, plug your nose, and vote for Joe Biden, whatever the fuck Democrat it is. I don't give a shit. That's all you gotta do. Because it's not what you're voting for. You're voting against fascism being in control of the largest military the world has ever seen.
I'm pretty behind an idea of a 3-party system, but yeah, that's so I think that's just sort of a natural.
That is my lesson. I think the bell rang. Bye.
And the kids are already gone, running out the door.
Yeah, and just
so what are we going to cover on the deep dive for subscribers then?
Well,
just a little bit more in depth on the results.
Well, I had the idea that I originally had as to where I wanted to take it is what these elections mean for the European Union. Because remember, like you kind of alluded to earlier in the show with Trump and the war and Putin and Erdogan and what's his face in Hungary, right? Like, had these elections gone a different way, those people would be saying different things today, right? And the balance of power in Europe would have very much shifted. Like, had France elected the new rally party, Hungary and Turkey would be moving to consolidate power, and that would be the bubblings of war in Europe, and that would have been bad. You know,
that's why it's so huge. Because, and I know we're going to get into this, but it really sort of sends a very, very compelling message that no, Europe is not bowing down to the far right, at least not yet. You know,
because the far right's picked up seats all over the place, but basically, I think what the British and French elections happening so close together with such similar results is sending a very loud message to the rest of Europe: get your shit together, while also sending a very loud message to America: you too, kids, right? Like, get your shit together, and we very much need to heed their advice.
Oh, I love those videos of all the little fascist kids in the National Rally Party when they saw the results, and they're so sad.
I know. Aw,
poor
I'm
babies.
sorry your fascism failed. I'm not sorry at all.
Thanks, Cathy, for a great conversation. Subscribe at Patreon, patreon.com/justbuylesscoffee. You can hear the rest of this deep dive. You can get involved in us in a lot of different ways. You can see our pre-show shenanigans that are usually not about politics. They're just about us shooting the shit and being ridiculous.
Usually just me going on a tirade about whatever bugged me that day.
Yeah, pretty much. So check that out. Check out YouTube, Just Buy Less Coffee, if you want to see the video. And if you're listening to the audio only versions on Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, make sure you're clicking the download button. Download the episode to your local device. Download numbers are how we are ranked with other news and political podcasts. Thank you very much, Cathy, for a great conversation. We'll move over to Patreon now for subscriber-only content, and we will see everybody next time. You've been listening to Just Buy Less Coffee, answering the deeper questions of American politics, featuring Troy Matthews at Keep Troy Blue and Cathy Cannon at Cannon's Fodder. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Threads, and X. All opinions are our own.